All right, what's up, guys? We're giving this whole YouTube thing a go. I wanted to talk about Foster Griffin and where we're at right now on the Nationals' decision to trade the left-hander who's been absolutely outstanding. So first things first, an update on the standings. The Nationals just lost minutes ago to the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta. This, of course, means that if you look at the wild card standings right now, you've got the Cubs who have pulled away for the moment as wild card one. Diamondbacks and Phillies are even in that second wild card. So that's basically playoff spots 5 and 6 in a 16 field. And then you've got 5 teams on the outside looking in, all trying to play catch up. The way I'm looking at this right now, I guess for the moment, you have to say that there are 7 teams for 2 spots. I actually think in the end, more authentically, it's going to be 6 teams for 1 spot. And the reason I say that is while the Phillies have a worse run differential and a worse expected win-loss than the Nationals, I think with their firepower, their payroll, and frankly, the window kind of closing on them a little bit as they get older, it does feel to me like the Phillies are actually going to make a push at the deadline that maybe some of these other teams don't. I could see them being buyers. Now, what will work against that is the Phillies do not have the system that some of these other teams have. You know, the Nationals, some of the other clubs in the wild card hunt. So it's a much harder thing for them to actually deal for impact players at the deadline, just with the sheer lack of overall quality of prospects. But if they wanted to give up, one of their top couple, they've only got a couple really good prospects at the top of the system. I think they could do that. I don't think they want to give up Arm Gage Wood. That wouldn't make a ton of sense, but maybe like Aiden Miller, they could give up in a trade and get something legitimate back. But I just think if you look at the standings again here, the Padres are always a threat and a risk to kind of push their chips in. They don't have as deep a system as they had in the past for AJ Preller. Preller's always a wild card. He's going to give up the farm for Soto, as we saw. He's going to give up Leo DeVries, was one of the better prospects in baseball, for Mason Miller. But they don't have that right now. And I actually have said for the last few weeks, I've kind of thought the Padres were in a spot where trading Mason Miller makes a lot more sense to recoup assets and to build that system back up. Now they've messed around. They've gotten hot. They're now right back squarely in the mix. Is Preller a guy that's really going to sell off when you're on the precipice of making the postseason? Do they think they could actually win if they get there? I think that's the question he's got to ask himself. But I guess my point is the Cardinals are not a team that I think is going to add much in any kind of an impact way. They're like the Nats. That's a team that's ahead of schedule, first year of a rebuild, isn't really supposed to be here. As you can see, they've dropped 7 of 10. They're struggling as it is. Lost again today. The Pirates, I think, would like to add, but if reports are correct, the Pirates are not really allowed to add payroll. So how do you get a lot better or bring in guys that are going to help you a ton if you can't really add money to your payroll? So if that's true, their moves are going to be fairly minimal. The Marlins are not a big-time buyer generally, and I don't think that'll be any different this year. The second half that they've had has not been particularly good. They're starting to warm back up, but they're 1 over 500. That's not a push your chips in situation. So, I say all this to say Washington is probably in a similar boat to St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Miami. Arizona's got a little more of a reason maybe to be aggressive and to try to add at the deadline. I would put them in like the tier above those teams in terms of willingness to go out and do something. But other than the Phillies, maybe the Padres, I don't think anyone's going to get a ton better. I don't think they're adding something huge here that's going to help them to pull away. So I don't know that the Nats, while they're 2.5 back after their loss tonight in Atlanta and could be 3 back by the time everybody wakes up in the morning, I don't think the Nats are, going to see everyone separate from them. So I guess let's just start the conversation there. And so if you're kind of spinning your tires here, let's say you split the 4-game series in Atlanta. You played a competitive ball game tonight. You got 2 homers from Dalen Lyle, 3 extra base hits from Luis Garcia. Wasn't good enough because the Nats went 0 for 9 with runners in scoring position. By the way, they are 2-0-4 as a team with a batting average 204 over their last 12 games with runners in scoring position. So while they're still hitting, they're still scoring homers, XBHs, slug, all those things are still there. They just haven't come through enough in those late game situations. And tonight they had multiple ops with less than 2 outs and a runner at third where they couldn't get a guy home. And that's just not going to cut it in these playoff caliber baseball games. But I think they're kind of going to be in that 2-game, 3-game back mix, unless they really go cold and get swept by Atlanta or something. I don't see them more than 4 games back. And the deadline's obviously coming up and looming on Monday. So then the big question becomes, well, what do they do with Foster Griffin? And that's what I wanted to discuss. That's why I'm here this evening with you guys, because I think it's really, really interesting. So a couple of things we can look at here. First things first is, where would Foster Griffin rank among some of the available pitchers on the market? So here's a Just Baseball piece. These guys do a pretty good job, but I thought we'd just take a peek. Is Tarek Skubal getting traded? If he's getting traded, Tarek Skubal's the number 1 pitcher on the market, obviously, but I don't think that's a lock. Do we really know? I'm going to assume he gets moved. I think he should get moved, but is he? If he's not getting traded, is Casey Mize getting traded? If you're not trading Skubal, then what's the point of keeping your other rental? Kind of feels like both of them should be dealt or neither. And my point is, there's a world where the Tigers don't trade either of those guys. And so now your best pitcher on the market, let's say, is Clay Holmes of the Mets. I don't think Gossman's going anywhere. I don't see him getting traded. Next on this list, Foster Griffin. So if so facto, you're talking about the second, maybe at worst, like the third best pitcher available. You're seeing Shane Bieber high on this list, has barely pitched, only 30 innings. We just saw him walk 6 in the first inning, give up 4 runs against the Nationals. So I'm not so sure from a Foster Griffin standpoint that, if you just go through and scroll these names again, that he's not the third best pitcher on the market, right? Skubal would be number 1. Let's say he gets traded. Okay, now Foster Griffin slots down as a lefty. If you're looking for a righty in the rotation or just a starter, I guess it doesn't really, handedness doesn't matter as much as it would like from a hitting standpoint or a bullpen standpoint. If you're trading Skubal, you're probably trading Mize. So in this world, he's probably 4th. Again, I don't really see Gossman or like Louis Varland going from Toronto. It wouldn't make sense. I think they feel like they're close. It was a disastrous year, and they can kind of just hit reset and reboot and try again next year. But that's something I think to think about is when people say, hang on to him, don't trade this guy. You're competitive. You're right there. Well, 2 questions. 1, where does he rank among the starting pitchers that are on the block? If he's in the top 2 or 3, then you're going to get something legit back for him. And then the second question would be, is the team acquiring a starter that they perceive to be in the top 3 in their rotation? Because if you're pitching in a game 3 of the playoffs, you're probably pitching again in like a game 7. And if you're acquiring someone to pitch twice in a 7-game series and to possibly be 33% of your playoff rotation or whatever, then you don't really have a big issue giving up something meaningful, some kind of quality player in the minors or a package of a few prospects, especially when there just aren't that many guys available. Now, it seems like the starting pitching market could be bountiful, but there's no guarantee that some of these names are available. So that would be my next thought. In terms of diving in a little bit more on Foster Griffin from this season and just what he's been, what you would be missing out on, let's go into his year, because I think Foster Griffin has been incredible in a way that people that monitor him all the time have seen, and maybe the average fan doesn't. So first things first, we talk about a 7-pitch mix, right? Here are the 7 pitches, his usage, how often he throws them, and the velocities. So coming down here, it's a legit 7 pitches, okay? Cutter, a third of the time. 4-seam fastball, 15% of the time. The sweeper, about the same. Changeup, 10% of the time. Curveball, 1 out of every 10 pitches. Sinker, 1 out of every 10 pitches. That's 2-seamer. And then the split, he's thrown 120 times, about 6%. So not nearly as many split fingers, but these 6 pitches, so cutter, 4-seam, sweeper, changeup, curveball, sinker. He's throwing all those pitches a bunch. You always hear, oh, this guy has 6 pitches, this guy has 7 pitches. And it's mostly nonsense. He legit does. He uses them all. In terms of what's been successful for him, remember, this is a guy, here's his velocities. He's basically averaging 91 with the four-seamer, right around 91 with the two-seamer. He's going to max out, between, throw some fours up there, but it's a lot of twos and threes in the 90s. He's actually had a lot of success with the fastball. Look at the run value here, 97th percentile. He gets ahead. I think that helps him, right? He pitches at the top of the zone pretty effectively. The other thing for Foster Griffin, though, is when you're sitting on all the other stuff, all the other off-speed offerings, that fastball plays up, right? He doesn't even have great extension. It's a little bit below average. So it's not like he's releasing the ball in front of your nose. But you're seeing him at a 97th percentile fastball run value. Breaking ball hasn't played as well. Off-speed run value has been very good. Going back to, just what is being hit and what isn't this year. 190 average against the four-seamer with a 210 XBA. So for a guy who's throwing 91, 92, nobody's really hitting the fastball. And then he's done a nice job against the cutter. He's pitched in a little luck with that offering. The changeup's been outstanding as well. I always like X slug here. Nobody's driving the changeup very effectively for him this season. So among some of the things kind of to monitor. But where has he been exceptional? Well, first things first, his walk rate. You're going to earn it against Foster Griffin, right? You are not going to be given free passes. He's going to throw the ball in the strike zone. The chase rate's really important with his stuff. I need you out of the zone. He's going to get swings and misses. Not at a very high rate, right around league average with the whiff, hair below, right around league average with the strikeout percentage. But he's been for much of the year up around a strikeout per inning. Right now, 124 Ks, 113 innings, has pitched to contact a little more often. But when you don't walk anybody, your whip can be barely over 1. That's where you're an all-star right there. That's why he's pitched at a pretty elite level. A lot of ground balls from him as well. Average exit velocity is ideal, so you're getting some weak contact here, and you're doing that obviously with 10th percentile fastball velocity among major league starters. So just kind of a deeper dive on some of the metrics and how he's thrown this season with a 13-2 record in his career now, and an ERA of 3 over 28 games and 21 starts. That spans to 2020. Remember, he made one appearance way back in the pandemic year, pitched 6 times out of the bullpen in 2022. This is a guy who's thrown to a 2.7 earned run average this season, who's going to be available for other teams to possibly pounce on. Another thing I think that's worth looking at here really quickly before we really get into what they should do and kind of make a decision on the future of Foster Griffin with the Nats is, all right, so his splits here recently. Like, I was a big believer that maybe he'd be in trouble second time through the league, coming over from Japan with his stuff, as teams saw you more, as lineups kind of got you a second time, or there was more tape on you, maybe you'd be in a little bit of trouble. ERA by month. May, he had one really bad outing where he gave up 9 earnings against the Reds. It was his only bad start of the year. Without that game, his ERA is like barely over 2 for the season. Since then, 1-1 in June, 2-1 in July. Look at him post All-Star break. It's only been the 2 starts, but 13 innings, 4 runs. And the average against has been up. The Diamondbacks actually had a really good plan against him. So I wonder if, there's this feeling of maybe that a regression could be looming, that like, if you view him like I think a lot of teams probably would, and he's pitched like he's a number 2 starter or something, he's much more a number 4. Do you feel like you potentially risk bringing him in and then getting into some trouble that way? I think that's a relevant question. But here's where I'm at. I think if you can get better value than you would get as draft compensation for offering him the qualifying offer, I think you've got to make the trade. The variable that needs to be discussed here is if the Nats hang on to Foster Griffin, my understanding is you offer him the qualifying offer this offseason. The QO is the ability to basically, it's not a franchise tag in baseball because you can't dictate that a player stays, but it's a way to protect yourself a little bit. So you say, we're guaranteeing you whatever the number would be this year. Let's say it's like $23 million for 1 year, okay? And you're going to pitch for the Nationals for $23 million if you take that deal, 1-year deal. Or he can say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to free agency because I'll make more than $23 million. I'm leaving. But because you put the qualifying offer on him, you get draft pick compensation for losing him, right? A comp pick. That comp pick, I'm told, by a member of the organization would be a pick just after the second round. So you're talking about like Roman Anthony range in terms of what Paul Toboni's pulled off running drafts in the past. What kind of player you can get there. Every draft year is a little different. You don't know who you can steer down the board or what kind of money you're going to have to spend in your draft pool. But we're talking about a pick outside of the top couple rounds, generally in the late 50s, 60, mid 50s, something like that. I think that pick would probably immediately turn into a top 10 prospect in the Nats system. I really believe that. So if you're not getting that type of player back for Foster Griffin, is it worth even trading him? I've got to do better than what I'd get in draft pick compensation. A top 50 player in the class, maybe one of my favorite high school bats in the country, maybe a college arm that can move pretty quickly that I like, maybe a guy I can push down the board a little bit who's a prep player and keep away from college with like first round type money or something. You could get creative. This really elevates your draft pool when you add another pick in this range. The big question becomes, and this is something Paul Toboni would know that I won't know, do you think you're going to get the go-ahead from ownership in advance that they are willing to extend a qualifying offer? I would have to look this up to confirm, but off the top of my head, I believe the last pitcher contract as an AAV given out over like $6 million a year, and the only one maybe since the Steven Strasburg extension after the World Series, is Trevor Williams at like $7 million. And that was a 2-year, $14 million deal, right? Well, okay, so his ownership's willing to offer the qualifying offer in the event that he accepts it, and now you got to pay him like 20 plus million for a 1-year deal. If they don't want to do that, or if that's not in the cards, that's something Toboni's got to figure out right here, right now. And they say, no, we wouldn't do that. That's too much money. We're not going to spend that on Foster Griffin. Well, now that changes my algorithm. Now I'm probably much more inclined to trade him because he's likely to leave via free agency. If I'm not using the qualifying offer, then my grand plan of getting this draft pick back doesn't matter anymore because it's not going to happen. So now I don't need a player better in a return than that draft pick would be. I just need the best possible return that I can get, and I take it, and I move on. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. My prediction right now is still that Griffin goes at the trade deadline. I felt like 75, 80% sure of that last week. Right now, I'm probably like 60, 65% sure. The only difference being it just seems like there's a little momentum within the media core. You saw Barry Svrluga of The Athletic, Andrew Golden of the Baltimore Banner, both writing the team should hang on to him. Now, that doesn't move the needle in terms of the team doing something based on the media saying they should, but you wonder sometimes, are there conversations that they're having that are informing them, with people around the situation that might make them think twice about the possibility that he gets traded. I could just tell you from my own discussions with sources that'll remain unnamed around baseball, every time I talk to someone that's not with the Nationals, they think it's crazy to me, or that I would suggest that they wouldn't trade Foster Griffin. Like they act like I'm saying that chocolate ice cream isn't good, like every single time. So it's just funny when you talk to Nats people, or certainly fans or media members. It's a very different tone of wanting the team to keep Foster Griffin, and then you start asking around, and they go, "You have to flip this house at peak value. You bought it, you fixed it up, so to speak, Curtis Meade style. There's no reason why you wouldn't see this thing all the way through and move on from him." But I would just need to know what you're getting in return. I'm not doing this for very little. I'm not trading him for, a 1-for-1 for like a lottery ticket 18-year-old arm that's the 26th prospect in my system. But if you're right now putting me on the hot seat and saying, would you trade Foster Griffin? I would lean toward yes, I would. Again, pending this whole qualifying offer situation. Would I predict that they trade Foster Griffin? Yes, I believe that I am leaning right now toward that happening. I think that's how this thing is going to end as of right now. But we got more time to discuss. Maybe we could do a couple more of these hangs in the days ahead. Thanks for watching. Try to do more of these and work on the technical side of this. It's all new to me. So appreciate you guys hanging out.